Morning, we're going to hear a number of oral arguments, starting with case number 28984, State of Ohio versus Robert Alexander. The state has waived argument in this case, so you'll have 15 minutes to argue, Attorney Budway. And just a reminder that we do videotape the argument, so keep your voice up. Please stay at the podium. And we've read the briefs and we're ready to proceed if you are.
All right. Okay, first of all, I'm Attorney Bobrowski here on behalf of Attorneys Budway and Duff.
Thank you for that.
And I also apologize for my lack of suit coat. I got out of my car, I got in the parking garage and went back and looked and said, my sport coat is on my dining table in Lorraine County. So with that being said, I will proceed the argument. I mean, basically, obviously, when a motion to suppress is appealed, it's a mixed question of law and fact. And if there's kind of an incredible evidence that supports the conclusions of law made by the trial court, deference is given to them. And it is a admittedly tough standard to clear. However, we think that the credibility of the evidence, even though the trial court is in the best position to assess that, does not support the finding that the motion to suppress should have been denied. By way of just brief overview of the facts of the case, on January 26, 2017, Mr. Alexander was driving on Interstate 80. A state trooper saw his vehicle driving in the center lane. He was going perhaps 60 to 62 miles an hour in a 70-mile-an-hour zone. There was some inclement weather. It was not terrible. There was some snow and sleet. You could see it easily on the dash cam. Trooper Lamb, who obviously was the state trooper involved, decided to follow Mr. Alexander. Trooper Lamb's typical policy, how he conducts these investigations, not investigations, but just observations.
Counsel, can I interrupt you already? I apologize. But was there any evidence at trial as to what the minimum speed limit was?
No. No evidence was adduced. Trooper Lamb then pulled up next to Mr. Alexander's vehicle. He observed Mr. Alexander driving with his arms locked and his head apparently behind like the A-frame of the doors, which he thought was somewhat suspicious in his experience. I noted in one of the briefs that I wrote that Judge Moore of this court noted that in somewhat similar circumstances, that the fact that a driver is sitting up straight with both hands on the wheel, driving a few miles under the maximum speed, is ludicrous as to reasonable suspicion and has no evidentiary value whatsoever. Now, obviously though, that was not the reason for the stop here. What Trooper Lamb then did was he pulled ahead of Mr. Alexander's vehicle. Obviously the dash cam, as it's facing forward, does not encompass what goes on behind Trooper Lamb. Trooper Lamb said that he observed a lane violation in his right mirror as Mr. Alexander's vehicle was behind him and to the right. Trooper Lamb was in the left inside lane going into the median, and Mr. Alexander was in the center lane, moved into the right lane, and then into the exit lane.
Counsel, can I interrupt you a minute? No offense, but I want to cut to the chase. We all, I think, have read the brief and know the facts. Tell me, as a court of appeals, how we're supposed to get around, overcome the testimony of the police officer who said he was 100% certain. How do we deal with that?
That is a difficult question. I mean, and I freely admit, and I'm well aware of the standard. You know, and the trial court did put that they found Trooper Lamb's testimony credible. That is where, at best, there is whether the fact the testimony was credible, though the trial court does have that deference. I mean, I freely admit that, and without putting too fine a point on it, there is some case law that I've seen, but nothing definitive, where the credibility does, you know, there is a little bit of gray area, but there's not much. I know this. I mean, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that it's a simple thing where a appellate court has the ability to simply overturn it just because they look at the facts differently. No, that's not the case. The standard is that there has to be supported by competent and credible evidence.
Is there anything in the dash cam that, in your opinion, would allow this court to say that it wasn't supported by competent and credible evidence?
That was where I was going.
Okay.
And that's why I was going through the whole recitation of the facts, which I know obviously everyone here is well aware of. When Mr. Alexander's vehicle does appear on the dash cam again, he is on the ramp. At that point, almost immediately, his turn signal is on. Now, you would probably have to parse the video quite thoroughly to determine whether it starts blinking immediately or whether it starts blinking just as he gets on the ramp. We argued, obviously, that it was blinking when it appears. I think, though, the trial court, and they have the same video, the video was played, that you could make the argument that maybe it just turned on just as the car appeared in the dash cam. That is the only, perhaps.
Oh, was the officer cross-examined on that?
Yes, he
point?
was. Yes, he was.
And what's the record going to show?
The record's going to show that it's his testimony that the blinker, the turn signal was turned on just as it appears on the dash cam. So it was not on prior to the vehicle appearing. Because what you have is the trooper's vehicle pulls off into the median, kind of angling towards the left. So you see the vehicle pulling onto the exit ramp. What the officer's testimony was that it was not on until the vehicle was on the exit ramp. He did not turn the turn signal on prior to that.
What, was the vehicle slowing down and stopping at that time, or was it stopped?
By the vehicle, are you referring to Trooper Lamb's?
No, Mr. Alexander.
Mr. Alexander's. Mr. Alexander was not stopping at that point. He was perhaps on the initial upward incline of the exit ramp.
I guess my question is, why would you have your turn signal on the exit ramp if you were pulling over to comply with the officer's lights? Unless that was an exit, he was going to get off anyways and turn right.
Just for context, I think to explain where everyone was. At the point Mr. Alexander pulls onto the exit ramp, he is 3 lanes over. The trooper is actually still on the highway. So
his lights on or not?
No, he comes across, then he comes across, gets on the exit ramp, and the traffic stop occurs up top. So that is where the actual stop occurred, because to that point, the trooper had not observed a traffic violation. Once he observed what he said was an illegal lane change.
Let me ask one more
Oh,
question.
sure, no, you go ahead.
So I'm trying to picture this in my head. How did he know to pull off of that exit ramp? If there were no lights on, did the officer signal him, or was he just exiting there?
He was exiting. Mr. Alexander that was his intended exit. And to that point, he had no, I'm sure he was aware that a state trooper had driven past him. Beyond that, he had no reason to believe that he was being stopped. He was simply exiting.
I can't remember if there was anything in the briefs about this. Did the turn signal remain on the video, on the dash cam the whole time until he was actually pulled over?
No, it did not. Because what you have, you do have a certain interval where Trooper Lamb gets over and Mr. Alexander is going up, and he's already actually completed the right-hand turn.
So what the officer testified to was that he did not see a signal until he was actually on the exit ramp.
Yes.
And so he turned his signal on, what, going to his competent credible evidence, and what, you were going to the credibility and so forth. So what you would have to surmise is he exited 2 lanes of traffic, got on the exit, and then turned on his signal.
That was the officer's testimony.
Because he wasn't at the end of the exit when he turned on the signal.
No, he was not. And to that point, just to be clear, the exit ramp basically makes it a right-hand turn. So theoretically, his turn signal would not have actually turned off until, at that point.
That's what I was going to say. Was there testimony about that?
Yes, there was. I mean, and much of it you can actually see on the video. I stand here realizing that I do have a high bar to clear. I understand that is certainly why the state is not here. They're submitting it on the briefs. But that is where we are. Mr. Allen, our position is that obviously the Trooper Lance does state that even though it was a manifestly awkward thing to drive, look out your right rearview mirror and kind of turn to the left and see traffic, he insisted he did see it. And obviously the trial court did find that to be competent and credible. Our only pivot point obviously was what we just talked about in regards to the dash cam, but be that as it may, we understand we do have a very high bar to clear here relative to what was adjudicated at the trial court.
Now, remind me, in this case, it was a no contest plea after the
Yes,
court's
yes,
decision.
it was, Your Honor. No contest plea was entered, he's out on appellate bond.
Any other questions? Judge Callahan?
I thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. The court will take the matter under advisement and issue a decision in due course. The clerk of courts will mail you a copy of the court's decision on the day it's released, and the opinions are also posted on the Supreme Court of Ohio's website. Thanks for your arguments today.
Okay, thank you very much.